Welcome back, everyone, to Issues of Faith. Happy to have with us Bishop David Choby of the Diocese of Nashville. We are talking about an apostolic exhortation that the Pope issued in March. We've had people on the show that have talked about the internal forum, that this document from the Pope is more moving the church in the direction of let's go toward this internal forum. In other words, if you think you yourself have to make a decision internally, and we're talking about marriage, if it is okay to get a divorce or okay to do some of these things. What is your understanding of the internal forum?
Well, first of all, with regard to the statement you just made, if a person finds themselves in a position where they have to decide what to do, okay, the church has a profound and a deep appreciation of the significance of an individual's dignity, inherent dignity as a human being. And one of the ways in which that's reflected is in terms of the decisions that we make. Currently, with regard to people of faith and their relationship with the government, there's a whole number of issues that deal with topics that relate to the question of freedom of religion, freedom of practicing religion, freedom of following religion according to what one believes that religion to teach and believe. So that there's something about us as individuals that really value the freedom that we have, that is God-given from our perspective, you know, to live our life in relationship to others in a way that recognizes that there's kind of a common good, you know, that we're all responsible for maintaining. As you and I sit here in this conversation, you know, we are currently experiencing the way in which society is being weakened by the actions of others that go to the heart of the security of our society, by the assassination, really, of police officers in Dallas and now in the past day or so down in Baton Rouge. So we all have responsibilities in the choices that we make and the values that we embrace to make a contribution to the stability of society. A family has that responsibility. Consequently, when it comes to making decisions about what is right and wrong, and in a recent interview that you had here a couple of weeks ago, that became a part of your discussion. How does one determine what is right or wrong? How does one determine what I should do in this instance or in that instance? There's that inner part of our personalities, of our persons, that shows the importance of that kind of a decision. You know, in the case of marriage, the church is pretty clear with regard to the necessity of establishing that a given marriage, if it breaks down in civil divorce, if a person seeks to know whether or not they are free to enter into a subsequent marriage, then that question has to be raised and addressed by the church, because for us, marriage is not a matter of a private interpretation. It's not a matter of a private understanding of things. There are certain fundamental principles that, you know, that define that relationship. You know,
So it's not an inner decision. It's not that decision about whether to remarry, whether to move on from the past marriage. It's a church decision.
Well, it's both. I mean, the individual is faced with the question, given what has happened in my life, given the church's belief that marriage by its nature is permanent and indissoluble, given Jesus' teaching on the topic of the permanence of marriage, which Scripture scholars say is one of his clearest and firmest teachings, that given all of that, you know, what's my duty, my obligation, my responsibility in terms of living out the commitment that I made? It may be that, in fact, when that individual entered into marriage, something essentially necessary was lacking or was withheld.
So is there a misunderstanding now, or I guess are there dual interpretations of what the Pope is trying to say? Because we did have someone on the show, Father Breen, a retired
Right.
Priest.
Right.
And he seemed to think one thing, you're saying some other things. What is the state right now of the interpretation of this document within the church?
Well, as a priest, if he were an active pastor, he would be in a teaching position. He's retired at this point. There's no authoritative significance to his opinion about something. It's his opinion. It's no more important than anyone else's opinion. It's his opinion. And the understanding that the church has, if there is a need for interpretation of what Pope Francis is saying or teaching, ultimately it will be he who will have to clarify what he means in some of his statements. But going back to your question about the difference between something like an internal forum response or external, there may be occasions where an individual knows within their heart of hearts that there was something about their promises, their commitment, that was withheld, but it can't be proven. Then the individual has got to determine for themselves. The priest doesn't really do it. A priest can work with an individual and counsel and help them come to grips with what has happened in their life. But in the final analysis, the individual has to determine what his or her obligations are to that commitment that was made at a certain point in time.
Now we only have 2 minutes left. I want to get to, is the Pope in this March 19th document, what is he saying about gay marriage? Is he changing the church position?
Normally I don't bring any text, but since this question, is out there and kind of being talked about, there's one particular document, this is from the document itself. Consequently, it's kind of the authoritative understanding. In discussing the dignity and the mission of the family, the Synod Fathers, the bishops who were there and discussing the topic, observe that as for proposals to place unions between homosexual persons on the same level as marriage, there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and the family. Now, it's important to understand that's a very strong statement. And what it's saying is, from the church's perspective, the relationship between individuals of the same sex does not enjoy the same status as the marriage between a man and a woman. But this should not be interpreted and should not be the basis for individuals to treat others who are attracted to someone of the same sex with hostility, with prejudice, bringing additional suffering into their life simply because of their sexual orientation. But by the same token, the church feels like it will protect its understanding of marriage.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's fascinating. We could go on for a long time. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Another day.
Yes, Bishop Choby, thank you for
You're
being
welcome.
with us. Thank all of you for watching Issues of Faith. That was great.